It's Wednesday, May 10th, 2023, and this is KBIA's Views of the News. Our weekly roundtable on media behaviors comes to you from the studio in the Reynolds Journalism Institute. I'm Amy Simons, and here with me are my colleagues, Kathy Kiely and Ernest Perry. On our program this week, it might just be must-see TV tonight. CNN's town hall with former President Donald Trump. We'll talk about what's in it for both the former president and for the news network at this point. We've got a former president who hates CNN and the network that spent years at odds with him, especially after yesterday's very big news. He once called TV a vast wasteland. We'll remember the legacy of former FCC Chair Newton Minow. And we're going to talk about the South Dakota State House reporter who is now out of a job after setting up prank phone calls spoofing the governor. There's a lot more that hopefully we'll get to today before our half hour is up, but we are going to start with the coverage in the E. Jean Carroll civil case against former President Trump. I'm not sure that anyone expected that verdict to come back as quickly as it did. Your thoughts on the coverage as you were watching that happen?
I wasn't surprised that it came back quickly. I mean, the case was pretty well laid out. The coverage, I think, has been almost a little subdued up until you got to the point of, okay, the jury's out, what the verdict is going to be. And what I mean by subdued is they pretty much covered the trial as a trial. Here's what the evidence is being presented. Here's what the case is. Here's how far back it's gone. And then when you get to the verdict that happened yesterday, there was sort of this, wow, it actually happened, and he's actually lost his case significantly, even though his attorneys keep pointing out, well, that this other charge wasn't, they didn't find him guilty for that, and we can appeal that. We can appeal what he was found guilty on, and we think we're going to ultimately win, that sort of thing. And then the former president comes out and continues to do what he's been doing, which
comes as a shock to
shock to no one.
Yeah, well, I think it wasn't really surprising that the verdict came as quickly as it did, given the preponderance of evidence. This was a case about establishing a pattern of behavior, and certainly I think anybody who's been watching TV for the last few years would have seen that, but certainly they had some really strong evidence that this is kind of an MO for the former president. And I think, to Ernest's point about the rape charge being thrown out, right, but the assault charge being upheld, I thought Ruth Marcus, a columnist for the Washington Post, had a really pretty good lead, where she said the former president of the United States has been, a jury has ruled him a sexual predator. Mm-hmm. And that's pretty tough stuff. So I think, how this is going to affect the political scene is really still up for question. And of course, we're going to talk about tonight's extravaganza, but that is pretty extraordinary. I mean,
the thing that sort of stands out to me in this is it's almost like every month, mm-hmm, either he is being indicted, or he's in a trial, or he's on his way to a trial. After a while, that's going to have to become an albatross around not only his neck, but also the neck of the Republican Party going into 2024.
Well, and I think, what it reminds me of is Clinton fatigue.
Yeah,
I mean, back in the 90s. And in some respects, I think Hillary Clinton was a victim of that. But it started with her own husband's patterns of behavior and, a drama every minute. And of course, that's why Barack Obama advertised himself as no drama Obama. Mm-hmm. But I do think, certainly I remember covering politics at the time when the Clintons were active, and Clinton fatigue was very much a factor. And when you talk to voters, that was very much a factor. And it was interesting. I saw Jeff Zeleny, who's been out on the campaign trail for CNN quite a bit, and he said he's detecting the same thing among Trump voters. The question is, who is going to be the anti-Trump? Because the Republicans who are anti-Trump have not coalesced around that person yet.
And to me, I think you're right in terms of the fatigue. but it's a fatigue that's not just going to impact the Republican voters. I think it's going to impact have an impact on the entire election and the whole election process. The question for me is, how's the news media going to cover this election? Because we're about to talk about it in a minute. You have, the former president, he's still out there. He's still a draw. He's a draw to the networks in terms of their ability to be able to bring viewers in.
And in so many of these situations, he's able to take these headlines and use them as fundraising opportunities. I'll say yesterday, the very first push alert or headline that came through after I saw the verdict read on TV came from the Chicago Tribune. And the subject line on that email was, "Jury rejects E. Jean Carroll's rape claim against Donald Trump, finds him liable for battery." And my first thought as I read that was, wait a minute. Did they just make this about rejecting the rape claim, but not any of the other things he was found liable for, and made it about her claiming this rape?
Right.
That the jury said no, that didn't happen, when they couldn't criminally prove that the rape had happened. Right. And that was, when you talk about patterns, that was a pattern in a lot of the right-leaning, and the further to the right even more so, the right-leaning media took that approach of like, hey, look at this, he wasn't found liable for rape, like it was the win. Right.
And I think you're going to see, especially when you talk about the right-wing publications and media outlets out there, you're going to see that from them, which also brings up another point that I'd like to make here is we're already starting to see polling, and the polling is showing that he has this massive support, that President Biden's support is dropping. If anyone is trusting a poll right now, there's something wrong with them, because I think that there's a lot of people who are fatigued and are on the sidelines, and they haven't even begun to formulate, an idea as to who they're going to vote for.
Yeah, and I agree with you, Earnest. I think it's incredibly disappointing to see as much media focus on the polling at this point as there is. That is the classic horse race coverage, and I don't argue that that's not something we should cover, but it shouldn't be the only thing we cover. Right. And again, we're doing that. What are we not covering? What are we should be setting the agenda for the presidential candidates, because clearly they're having difficulty finding an agenda. So let's start to tell them what the problems of the country are so they can start focusing on them.
Yeah. No, so let's start talking about what's going to end up happening tonight. Talk about timing, right? This happens yesterday and today. He's due on live TV tonight with Caitlin Collins on CNN for this town hall that has been scheduled. And it's interesting, given from the point that this was announced last week, both the former president and CNN each caught a lot of heat for each agreeing to participate in this event, for CNN holding it and the former president going to sit down with CNN. What's in it for each of them at this point?
They need each other, right? This is a very classic unhealthy relationship, right? The cable news networks, it's hard to fill 24 hours, 7 days a week with news, and so they're going for what we were talking about last week, sort of the Jerry Springer not so reality show. And that's what's in it for CNN ratings. As Donald Trump has pointed out in his tweets, he's actually making fun of the station for coming back to him, or the network rather. Mm-hmm. And what's in it for Donald Trump? He can't stay away from attention. No. He wants the attention. So I thought it was hilarious and classic. He's actually promoting this like a studio wrestling match. He said in a tweet or something, some social media post, whatever you call it,
wherever he's still allowed to
wherever
be.
He's on.
Yeah.
But he posted on social media, this could be a disaster for many people, including me. So he's like the flying Melendez. Come see if I fall off the tightrope.
Well, I mean,
Evel Knievel is going full force.
Well, just think about it. I mean, he knew that there was a possibility that a verdict was going to come back in this case before this airs tonight, and of course now that's happened. So it's like, okay, that's just one more log to throw on top of the bonfire that we've got going.
And
here.
By the way, what a great way to put the thumb in the eyes of Rupert Murdoch and Fox.
Yeah.
Go on CNN instead of Fox,
right?
And give them the ratings.
And give them the ratings. However it turns out, because of course, the moderator is going to ask him questions about this verdict and what does he plan to do and exactly
he's going to lie and be bombastic as he usually does.
Yes, he usually does, and he's gonna twist it in some way to make it look as if he's the victim. And it's just going to be interesting. But I think you're right. I mean, CNN needs this because right now they want to play this as they tend to do from time to time. They want to play this we're the middle of the road cable news network that you should come to if you want to hear the real story. Meanwhile, you've got MSNBC and Fox over here, and they're in their respective camps. And when you look at the viewership for cable news, that's where it is.
Exactly.
It's a binary, quite frankly.
Yeah.
So let me ask you something, and I'm going to ask this question knowing it's a loaded answer, potentially, from the two of you, but I'm ready to take it. So am I the fool if I watch this tonight?
Depends on if that's the kind of entertainment you like. I mean, if that sort of gets you motivated and gets you going, knock yourself out.
Okay, so you're putting it in the camp of entertainment, not necessarily like I'm going to be informed in any way by sitting down.
It's 100% entertainment. Butter the popcorn, honey.
Yeah.
No, there is no... And I mean, I think that really is what we're down to now. It's really a lot cheaper to mic up Donald Trump in a studio than it is to go out to Kentucky or Missouri or Tennessee and find out what's really on people's minds. And we are now into news as entertainment. And clearly, I mean, Donald Trump understands it. That's how he's promoting it, come see whether I make a fool of myself. Yeah. And the other thing is, whether he does or doesn't, it's not going to make any difference to his hardcore supporters. And as long as the Republicans are divided, that's all he needs is his hardcore supporters. As long as there are 5 or 6 would-be anti-Trumps out there, that's all he needs.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's and it could be a precursor to how this election is going to take place, especially on the Republican side, because as you just said, he still has that base, and that base is 40%, which is enough to get the nomination, and he's trying to maintain that. I mean, DeSantis's numbers have already dropped according to the polls, if you want to believe them, and there's no other candidate out there that's even registering 10%.
Interestingly, Lynn Cheney has purchased airtime. And there is an anti-Trump ad that I saw. The USA Today has a story about it today. And it's, I assume it's going to air around this show, which is kind of interesting, where she takes him to task for January 6th.
Okay. Well, so in a move that's likely to surprise no one, Tucker Carlson has announced that he's going to be making his big comeback. Puck News reported late yesterday afternoon that Tucker's teaming up with Elon Musk and will be bringing his show back on Twitter. Only Elon Musk isn't necessarily saying that's a done deal yet.
Yeah, why are we surprised? Elon Musk pulling the rug out from under somebody, right? And so, here's what I thought when I read this exchange. Tucker goes on social media, Twitter, I believe it was, to say, we're back, and announcing this. And a few hours later, Elon Musk says, not so fast. I just thought this is full employment for the American Bar Association. Because, by the way,
he's
Tucker
still under contract.
Right.
Tucker's still under contract, yes,
and
to Fox.
But is saying that he would be willing to forego his $25 million non-compete clause.
Because, again, he can't get away. He first of all, 2 things. He may be willing to forego.
But I don't think Fox is.
And secondly, again, this gives you a sense of the kind of person attention is more intoxicating than money.
Yeah.
And I think that's why he's willing. But what will the Murdochs say? I think that's a different question.
Again, I can't see how they're going to let him out of that. Out of that contract in order to do this, which is probably why Elon Musk is
like,
saying,
"Whoa, no, back
minute,
up, buddy!
like,
I don't need a tampering case here.
Not another lawsuit."
He doesn't need another lawsuit, especially anything related around Twitter at this point. And I mean, I think you're right. Again, trying to stay in the public eye because when Fox pulled the plug on him, I mean, he's pretty much gone dark. He can send out tweets and that sort of thing, but that doesn't give you the audience that Fox News was giving him. And now
every single day,
and now it's sort of like a drug, and it's like I got to get back. I have to get back, and I just don't see how that's going to happen. As number one, as long as he's under that contract, and even if they let him out of the contract and he goes to Twitter, he's never going to get that audience there. It's just not going to happen.
No way. I mean, most of us would be satisfied. I'd be happy to take $25 million and go sit on a beach with an umbrella drink, but I'm
but
just
you're not addicted. But you're not addicted to attention.
Right.
Yeah. So yeah.
So I have to say, when I heard that Newton Minow died this past weekend, I had to wonder what he thought about today's media landscape. Minow died this weekend at the age of 97. He was an influential chair of the Federal Communications Commission, and in the early 1960s, famously said this.
I invite each of you to sit down in front of your own television set when your station goes on the air and stay there for a day without a book, without a magazine, without a newspaper, without a profit and loss sheet or a rating book to distract you. Keep your eyes glued to that set until the station signs off. I can assure you that what you will observe is a vast wasteland.
A vast wasteland. And given what we've been talking about for the last 27 minutes or so, this addiction to attention, what we were talking about last week about Jerry Springer and reality TV, I can't help but wonder, what did this man think at the time of his death about not only the vast wasteland that is TV, but how the internet has even expanded that further?
Well, yeah, that was the point I was going to make. I mean, it's,
we have a vaster wasteland.
With the streaming services and everything else, I mean, the wasteland is even more vast. And I think that he would, and probably, up until his death, was probably saying, hey, we can do better. But again, as we've talked about, you've got to fill 24/7, and you've got to fill 24/7 over multiple platforms. So how are you actually going to do that? And you have to think about the attention span of your audience now, which is far shorter in 2023 than it was in 1962. Mm-hmm. Okay, so again, I mean,
in part because of the vast wasteland he was talking about.
No, exactly.
Yes,
I mean, I think probably when he was on his deathbed, Newton Minow was saying, "I told you so." I mean, he is really a prophet, and what was really remarkable about that speech is he delivered it before the National Association of Broadcasters when he was, I think, 35 years old, and the head of the Federal Communications Commission, and just an amazingly gutty speech to give. But in many ways, he was the precursor. I think about Carroll, the journalist from The Guardian who broke all of the news about Facebook and the filter bubble and the manipulation of voters through social media, and her going to a TED Talk in Silicon Valley and saying, "You, the gods of Silicon Valley, is this what you want?" Really, it was Newton Minow who set the model for that, being able to speak truth to power. And it really, everything he said has come true. And as you said, Amy, and then some, with the pervasiveness of the media. I mean, it's interesting on that clip, you hear him say, "Watch until the station signs off."
Right.
I had to explain to a younger faculty member what that meant.
To a faculty
Yes, exactly, because we're that old. Yes,
Yeah.
yes.
I remember when KOMU signed off when I was here. Yeah.
I
So
mean,
it's never off. The media is never off now, and which isn't to say, he also said in that same address that when television is good, nothing is better.
And think about some of those examples of that, of 9/11, of the moments that we have that are now all part of our collective memory, and how television made those real for us, or about the Vietnam War and how the images that came through changed the
civil rights movement.
Yeah,
absolutely. I think, so
and
I
then
think
Jerry Springer.
Yeah, I mean, I think that the answer here, when you see somebody like Newton Minow, who was idealistic enough to take this truth to power, the message is really, and what I try to say to our students, don't be discouraged. It's easy to get discouraged.
Right.
But we have the power to decide what kind of media we have. We have the power. It's that power of choice, and also consciousness of understanding how the media is affecting us. And we can make it better. We can demand better. But that's the challenge, I think, not just for the people in the media, but for the people who consume it.
I mean, to me, the speech is important that he gave. But think about all the other things. I mean, he was one of the leaders in bringing about presidential debates, and he worked with the League of Women Voters. He was one of the people who pushed for the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, which led to
the creation
of NPR, the creation of PBS, and even on top of that, he pushed Kennedy not only in terms of the space program, but the space program as it moved into satellites, and the fact that you could get broadcasting, going back to television can be a tool for good and can beam out news and information across the globe, which was something that back then was just in its infancy. But he pushed for federal dollars to be spent to an R&D to build that out. And, yes, for all the ills that we talk about with television, without him, it wouldn't be those things.
Well, and I think, I saw a friend on social media who is on the board, actually the president of the board of the Corporation for Public Broadcasting, putting out a post about Newton Minow, and I think that's why you're seeing a response in the industry. He was so revered because he had these incredibly high standards. The other thing is just the breadth of his career.
Right.
This is a guy who at one point supported Adlai Stevenson for president, and then late in his career, Barack Obama, two Illinoisans. So a kind of an amazing arc of American history wrapped up in that life.
Right.
Okay, so as we talk about the good, too, on Monday, Columbia University awarded the 2023 Pulitzer Prizes. Of course, there were the, always wins, the New York Times getting one, the Associated Press, Washington Post. But the one that melted my heart is the father-son reporting team. What did they end up winning for?
Well, they won for an expose of police corruption in a small town in Alabama. And so I think the Pulitzers often try to uplift this kind of local reporting that is courageous and hard to do. It's hard to do an investigation in a local newsroom now for all the reasons we've discussed. But I think one of the reasons your heart melted, and so did mine, Amy, and all of us, is we're about bringing on a new generation of journalists. And this dad did this with his son. The dad had won a Pulitzer earlier for column writing, and he said, but to win one with your kid, that's gold. And the work they did exposing really what was happening in this town in Alabama was very similar to what happened in Ferguson. It was raising money by police fining ridiculously infinitesimal infractions and really putting a burden on the citizens. And that is what they exposed, and I think it's the kind of stuff that goes on, unfortunately, in a lot of small town America.
I mean, you see it all. You see it all over the country, where you have, basically what they're doing is poverty fines is pretty much, and the problem with that is that it usually happens to people who have very little voice. They were able to provide a voice and shed a light on a problem that had existed for generations, and it led to the police, the head of the police department basically resigning and being forced out, and it led to some changes that hopefully will lead to better lives for these people, which is the same thing that happened in Ferguson. But I mean, again, there's some underlying problems there. The media has to stay on top of that. But it sounds like you've got a father and son duo down there that's not going to let go of this, and well deserved for them.
Okay, so we have just a couple minutes left, and our next topic, well, two really are ones I want to classify and put into that really, what were you thinking file. Let's start with up in South Dakota, where the Dakota News Now and KOTA Territory News have fired reporter Austin Goss, saying in a statement that they deeply regret the lack of judgment he showed. What did he do? Well, he's charged with a misdemeanor count of making threatening, harassing, or misleading contact in the form of a prank telephone call that he set up online through a website to go to the state's Republican Party chairperson, spoofing the governor's telephone number on caller ID. Now, I can't stop eye rolling on this one because it's probably the most immature thing this guy could have done. Call sounded like it was coming from a mobster accusing the recipient of having stolen COVID vaccines. And he said he had this legitimate fear for his safety and called the police, and the reporter got fired.
Go ahead.
Well, I was going to say, part of a lot of what we do is want to, because the media does come in for criticism so much that we like to hold up examples of which we have during this show where we do good jobs. But I think for our credibility, we have to say this comes under the category of reporters can be dumb, you-know-whats too.
Yeah.
And that was just, there's, you can't even get started on what's wrong with that.
Like I sound, you can't make some of the stuff you just can't make up.
Grow up, dude.
Yeah, what were you thinking?
Grow up.
What's the point here? I mean, were you upset about something that the governor had done?
They supposedly had that the recipient of the call had told the Associated Press, like, yeah, we would sometimes send snide text messages to each other, joke around, but I felt like this one just went too far. Right. Ernest is just giving me the look. Ernest is just giving me the look. Yeah. Okay. So when Kathy saw that we were going to be talking about this story, she sent me a few articles about two USC journalism students who were arrested while trying to fly out of the Kansas City airport last week. They were there to cover the NFL draft, and, well, one of these guys, a graduate student, he was expected to graduate this weekend. The other is wrapping up his first year on campus. They are accused of stealing jerseys from the NFL draft from a green room type area because they were there. They weren't being used anymore.
Another new kind of stupid. I don't get it. It didn't belong to you. Why would you take it?
And the jerseys are jerseys that are given to the players.
With their number draft one on number, it, like the first round draft.
Yeah. So it has their draft number. And as some of the people said, some of the players are quite sentimental about these.
Very sentimental about them.
And I would imagine that they have some value on the resale market. So, yeah, all kinds of wrong. And the worst part about it is we'd like to send journalism students to cover the draft. How much harder is it going to be now?
Yeah, and here's the other thing. Did you not know they had cameras all over the place? Somebody was going to see that.
What kind of journalist are you?
This trip was paid for by the university. I would like to think if we were in a similar situation, we'd brief on our students on what not to do. Okay, we'll let that go. Before we do go, though, I want to point out something. Our director, Travis McMillan, keeps track of Views of the News trivia, and he pointed out to me that, Ernest, you and I are very quickly approaching 10 years since we took our seats replacing Charles Davis and Lee Wilkins alongside Mike McKean. He also tells me that when we return on August 16th, we'll be starting season 16 of the multi-platform edition of Views of the News, the one you hear here on KBIA and see on TV. Yep. Anyone who knows or lives in Columbia knows that it's move on time for the academic year, and we're going to be taking a break. We'll be back with you August 16th.